So before we start learning tonight, an apology and a notice. Even though we publicized the topic of tonight's shiur, I do take the liberty to decide to deviate from what we publicized, and that is for a very simple reason. I realize that next week, Sunday, we won't have a shiur because I'm going to be on a plane on my way to America next week, Sunday night. I actually think I'm going to be in America already, but so we won't have a shiur. And the next year probably will be Ner Rishon Shel Chanukah, and I am arriving Sunday afternoon right before Adlokas Ner Chanukah. I probably will be tired because I never sleep on planes, but I do plan to give the shiur. And because this is the last year before Chanukah, I will be discussing a sugya regarding Chanukah and not what was publicized. And I hope we'll have many opportunities to make up for the shiurim that the topic that we will be skipping today. We will not speak about Machoros Asuros, Gid Anosha this week's parsha, but about the fundamentals of Hadlokas Ner Chanukah. So I would appreciate if I could have a Rambam Zmanim, and a small Rambam if available, if there is one here. And so the two most common discussions, is there any smaller Rambam than that big one? A small Shabsa Frankel? If not, then let it be. So the two most common discussions whenever we speak about Ner Chanukah, Halacha L'Maisa, are where to light and when to light. And these both topics have many, many different opinions. Where to light? So the meaning of Hasidim throughout the world is to light inside, in their homes. And the Ramo writes in Tov Reish Ayin Aleph in Siv Zayin that the meaning Bizman Hazeh is to light inside your home. And we make presuming it's only for B'nai Habayis. And the Gemara in the beginning of the Sugya, in Shabbos Daf Chof Aleph, the Gemara says, Ner Chanukah mitzvah nicha al Pesach beisor mebechutz, ve'im hoyudar ba'aliyah, b'chaloina somach l'shus harabim, u'b'shas ha'sakona manichoi al shulchonoi v'dayoi. So why would Hasidim light inside if the Gemara says, b'shas ha'sakona manichoi al shulchonoi v'dayoi? The Ramon Sementov Reish Ayin Aleph writes that our minig is to light inside, and all the Rishonim across the board, spanning countries and continents, Gedolei Ashkenaz and Gedolei Sfarad, they all write that our minig is to light inside. And the question is, yes, when we were in Golis, many times it was a sakona to light outside, but many times it was not. Not always were the Gzeiros, not always were we persecuted, and for hundreds of years in many different countries, there was no real sakona to light outside. I think in Varsha or in Lodz, in Poland, in the center of cities where 95 or 99% of the residents were Jewish, probably there was no sakona to light outside. But the fact is that Hasidim lit inside. And this is something we will be discussing tonight. But fundamentally, in Eretz Yisrael, most Shomer Torah light al Pesach habayis mebechutz, like the Gemara says, like the Rambam says, like the Shulchan Aruch says. Why not? So in America, I think most Jews light b'chaloin hasomach l'shus harabim. I don't think anybody really lights al Pesach beisoy mebechutz, even though in America, if you take Lakewood, there are no goyim living amongst us, so there would be no danger and no reason not to light al Pesach beisoy mebechutz like we do in Eretz Yisrael. But the minig is either chaloin hasomach l'shus harabim and Hasidim the world over light inside. And why is that? So part of our discussion tonight would be when there is no sakona and you light inside, are you yoitza or not? Two gedolim of our time, and this is a fascinating and a somewhat amusing discussion. So in Shalosh Teshuvos Dvar Yehoshua Chelek Aleph Siman Mem, and let me tell you a bit about the Dvar Yehoshua. Rabbi Yeshua Menachem Ehrenberg was really one of the Galiziani Gedolim and the great Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael. He was an Av based in Tel Aviv, a Belzer Chosid, and an original Belzer Chosid. He was very sympathetic to many aspects of the state of Israel, and he was a real Belzer Chosid. And in Chelek Aleph Siman Mem, in his Sefer, he writes that in our days, whoever lights al Pesach Beisim Abachutz, Lo Yotzei Yedei Chavosoi, and you need to light the Dafka B'fnim. And he sent a Sefer to Rav Elyoshev, and Rav Elyoshev in Kovetz Shuvas Chelek Aleph, Siman Samach Zayin, Rav Elyoshev writes Rav Ehrenberg somewhat with a drop of cynicism, and he writes, I know you're a Belzer Chosid, and I took it for granted that you will be miyasev the minik to light inside, but I didn't imagine you're going to go to such an extreme to say that somebody that lights in accordance to the Gemara al Pesach Beis Avritz is not Yotzei Yedei Chavosei. I think it would be enough if you would argue then if you light inside the Yotzei, but to say you're not Yotzei if you light in accordance to the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, and the Gemara al Pesach Beis Avritz seems to be somewhat of an exaggeration. And a Chelek Beis in Shalosh Teshuvos Vayishlach, Siman Kuf Aleph to Kuf Gimel, Rav Ehrenberg, Oimed al Datoi, and he says yes. So his argument is, B'shas HaSakona Chazal were Oikar, the original Takona, and they made a new Takona. And Lanias Daiti, to say you're not Yotzei al Pesach Beisim Abachutz, I think Rav Elyoshev is right. It seems to be too much of a stretch to say that when you're Madlek al Pesach Habayis Machutz, you're not Yotzei Yedei Chavosei. No. When Chazal said B'shas Sakona Manichal Shulchan Yadayah, they weren't oiker. They didn't totally deviate from the original halacha al Pesach Beisim Mebachutz. They said you could light inside and you're Yotzei B'shas Sakona. So, on the other hand, Rav Elyoshev says, Bezman hazeh, if you light inside, you're not Yotzei. I think that is also an exaggeration, and I will explain my opinion about Mokom Hadlokas Ner Chanukah Bezman hazeh. I personally light two Chanukias, inside and outside. It's not a psak, and it's not something I recommend to others, but that is what I do, and my reasoning is, to me, minig ovis is of extreme importance. Avoisai Hagedoshim v'Rabboisai, including the Kloisem Rebbe, they lit Ner Chanukah b'fnim, and that is what I do. I adhere to minig Avoisai, but I see no reason in the world not to light al pi halacha lefi tekonas Chazal al Pesach Beisim Mebachutz. I have another reason to light inside and outside, because I have a big, beautiful Chanukiah that I got as a gift. I'm afraid to light that one outside because somebody might be tempted to just carry it away. Somebody might be tempted to carry away the Moshe Weiss's menorah, but when I light the little one outside, nobody took my menorah, so obviously it's not so choshev the Moshe Weiss's menorah. But if I light the big silver one outside, which costs a lot of money, I don't want to be oivan lifnei yevel sit in michshol, and therefore I light inside, but I also light outside. And when people ask me on which of the two I say the brocha, I say the brocha I light inside, but I live on the ground floor. Many of you visited my home, so it takes me 10 seconds from inside to outside, and I don't start saying Aneres Alolo until I lit the first candle outside. There is no hefsek. So the brocha I say on the hadloka in my home is also valid for the hadloka that I light outside my home, al Pesach Habayis. So let's go directly to the sugya. What is the issue? So before we go into details of this halacha, I want to make an interesting and a very important comment, which I think is emes lamito, and I didn't see anybody touching upon this comment, even though everybody learns Hilchos Chanukah. There are hundreds of svarim in Hilchos Chanukah, but I think this is a very important comment. Baal Hanes Hamakir Benisoi has two different mitzvahs or obligations, which is the Perek in Te'ilim, which deals more than any other perek about hoidoya, about giving gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Perek Kuv Zayin. It is from this perek that we learn Arba Tzrichem Lahoidois. And the perek in Tehillim specifies Yordeyamim, Horchim et Boreas, Chodesh Nesrapa, and Osir Sheyotzum Beis HaAsurim. And the posik, which is a refrain, it comes back 4 times in this perek, is, and each and every one of the Arbosh Tzrichem Lahoidois, Yoidu Lashem Chazdoi, V'nifla'oisav levnei Adam. And I think this posuk has 2 different principles. Number 1 is Yoidu Lashem Chazdoi, give gratitude, give thanks. Recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He is the one that performed miracles. Yoidu Lashem Chazdoi is between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'nifla'oisav levnei Adam is persu menesa. Be mefarsim. Let others share your emunah, your gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Yoidu Lashem Chazdoi is one principle. Nifla'oisav levnei Adam is number 2. Yoidu Lashem Chazdoi is zeicher leneis. Nifla'oisav levnei Adam is persume nisa. And the same goes, Oida Hashem ma'od befi, uvesoich rabim ahaleleno. Oida Hashem yoid befi is between me and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is Yoidu Lashem Chazdoi. That is zeicher lenes. Uvesoich rabim ahaleleno. That is nifla'oisav livnei Adam. That is persume nisa. So my fundamental question is, what is ikar mitzvahs ner Chanukah? Is it zeicher lenes or persume nisa? Is it all about persume nisa and only about persume nisa? Or is it primarily about zeicher lenes and also persume nisa? It definitely is about persume nisa. That is clear. That has so many sources. But is it only persume nisa? Or maybe it starts off fundamentally with zeicher lenes for yourself, for your family. And you might as well do persume nisa as well. I think this is a machlokes between the Tur and the Rambam. The Tur in Tov Reish Ayin Beis writes that Chazal were metakan at Lukas Aner kedei lahazkir haneis. Lahazkir et haneis. That is zeicher haneis. The Rambam Perek Gimel Halacha Gimel of Hilchos Megillah v'Chanukah writes kedei laharot ulegalot haneis. Laharois ulegalais is persume nisa. And I think this reflects on the halachas regarding Mokam Hadloka and Zman Hadloka. Regarding Zman HaHadloka, there's a machlokes Rambam and Tur. The Rambam writes, Perek Daled Mehilchos Chanukah, that the mitzvah is, the Gemara says, Mishet tishkechamo ad sheticha regel min hashuk. The losher of the Rambam is im shkiyoso, im hashkiya. What does that mean? The Tur writes, Im soif shkiyoso. And that is the opinion of the Beis Yosef. So Sfaradim light with Tzeis HaKoichovim. So do most Chassidim. So do I. I like the Tzeis HaKoichovim. The Litvische world writes by the Shkiya. And the Chazon Ish opinion was somewhat in between, and Rabban Kotler said the same in America. But the more important question is, till when? So the Rambam writes, Im shkiyosa ad shetichla regel menashik, and that is approximately a half hour. That is tichla regel menashuk. And the Rambam writes, if a person was not nadlik ner Chanukah, v'kol so regel menashuk, then shuvei ner madlik. You no longer have a mitzvah. The Tur in Tov Reish Ayin Beis writes, lechatchila, you need to be madlik from the Shkia till Tzeis HaKoichovim. But if you were not, you still could light ner Chanukah with a brocha till Alois HaShachar. There no longer is any persume nisa. No one is out there any longer. And I say, tu l'shitosei and Rambam l'shitosei. If the Rambam writes that mitzvahs ner Chanukah is all about legalois ulaharois esaneis, it's persume nisa. So the Rambam L'shitosoi, if it's called Regel Menashuk and no one is out there, there is no Persum Nissa, then it's a Ma'uvis Lo Yuchanet Kon, you lost your mitzvah. It makes no sense. And if you're going to make a brocha, it's going to be a brocha levatola. The Tur L'shitosoi, Ad Shetich L'Regel Menashuk is Lechatchila. But if you miss that time, you could light Ad Alois Ashachar. There is no Pesum and Issa, but you still need to light to make a Zaychel and Es. And the Tur L'shitosa, he writes the mitzvah is Lahazkir Es Anes. So Rambam and Tur L'shitosa. Which brings us to question number 2. Zman Adlok is one question. Mokam Adlok is the other one. And I think Zman and Mokam are Kruchim Yardu Men HaShamayim. Vaha Baha Talia. So when the Gemara says, B'shas Sakona Manicha al Shalchona V'dayoi, and we totally disregard Rav Ehrenberg's opinion that B'shas Sakona was a new takona and Pesach Beisar Mebuchutz is out and al Shalchona is in. That really doesn't make any sense and has no substance, no rai in the Gemara. But the real question is that a special takona only B'shas Sakona, or even Shalo B'shas Sakona, you're yoitza when you're madlik b'fnim. B'shas Sakona, Chazal say, you're in danger. So, lechatchila, you should write b'fnim and not b'chutz. Don't put yourself in jeopardy. But even Shalo B'shas Sakona, a person is yoitza b'fnim. And I brought rayas from the Rashba and the Ritva. Even Shalo B'shas Sakona, a person is yoitza b'fnim. The Rashba, Shabbos Chof Aleph, deals with the Machlokes in the Gemara. Muta l'shtamish lo'ira, oy osa l'shtamish lo'ira. And the Rashba proves that the halacha is Commander Omar, osa l'shtamish lo'ira. What's the Rashba's proof? The Gemara has an Eboya, Ner Chanukah v'Ner Beisai, which comes first? Ner Shabbos and Ner Chanukah. If a person has one wick, one candle, one little bit of shemen, what is more important, Ner Shabbos or Ner Chanukah? Maskonas halacha is Ner Shabbos, koydem mishum shlom bayis. But the Rashba asks a very simple question. Tovim hashanayim en echad. Why would there be a contradiction between Ner Shabbos and Ner Chanukah? He should light Ner Shabbos al shulchanoi. Ner Chanukah al Shulchanoi. And the same Ner will be Ner Shabbos al Ner Chanukah. So the Rashba says, if you have a dilemma, either Ner Shabbos or Ner Chanukah, light Ner Chanukah al Shulchanoi. This proves no. Ner Shabbos and Ner Chanukah cannot be the same, because Ner Shabbos is all about Lishtamish Loira, and Ner Chanukah also Lishtamish Loira. Ner Shabbos is all about Shalom Bayis. So they can't be the same. It's either this or that because they are contradictory. And this is the Rashba's proof that la halacha osa l'shtamish la'oira. It is clear from the kasha of the Rashba that it's not b'shas sakona. So how could a person be yoytze ner Chanukah b'fnim? So it is clear as daylight, according to the Rashba, that din Pesach Beisim Ebuchutz is only lechatchila. But if it's a Shabbos at Chak, and you have a dilemma, Ner Shabbos or Ner Chanukah, you could be madlik Ner Chanukah b'fnim. So the Rashba proves that even Shalo b'Shabbos at Chak, you yoytza b'fnim. Rashba l'shitosoi, because in Shabbos Chof Aleph, the Rashba says like the Tur, you could light Ner Chanukah till Alois HaShachar. And I say these two questions, b'fnim, Alois HaShachar, Ha Talia. When you light b'fnim, you have no pesum and nisa for b'nei rishus harabim. So the Rambam l'shitosoi, and the Rambam l'shitosoi. I think the Rambam clearly says only b'shas sakona yoytze b'fnim, shaloi b'shas sakona you're not yoytze. And that I am bringing from the Rambam is also something I don't think anybody said before. Mokem henichu min hashamayim. So let me give a brief introduction. Hilchas Megillah and Chanukah come together, and the Rambam put them together in one Seder. Hilchas Megillah v'Chanukah. Perek Aleph Beis is Hilchas Purim and Megillah. Perek Gimel Daled is Hilchas Chanukah. Because both of these halachas have so much in common. Both are chagim derabbanon, nisim shenasu b'zman ba'yesheni. And each of these halachas is relatively short. And that's why the Rambam put together Hilchas Megillah v'Chanukah. Megillah and Purim is Aleph Beis, Chanukah is Gimel Dalet. Perek Gimel does not deal with Hilchas Adlokas Haner, only with Dinei Halel. Perek Dalet is all the halachas of Ner Chanukah. So let me make this clear. Perek Gimel is Halel, Perek Dalet Ner Chanukah. There are only two halachas that are written in Perek Gimel. And why is that? Perek Gimel halacha Aleph Beis are not yet halacha. It is the story of Chanukah. And the Rambam followed in the footsteps of the Gemara in Shabbos Daf Chof Aleph. In the beginning of the Sukkah, the Gemara asks, "My Chanukah? What is Chanukah?" And Chazal tell the story of the Yavonim and their Gzeres and the war and the Nes Pachas Shemen, and the Rambam does the same. So Perek Gimel halacha Aleph Beis is the story of Chanukah. It's not really halachas. Perek Aleph is Malchus Yavan, their decrees against Torah, and the war that Matisyahu waged. And Perek Gimel is Lefichach tiknu chachomim sheba'osei hador sheyiu madlikim nerois be'erev al pischei bateihem. Be'erev al pischei bateihem. So the Rambam writes the halacha Pesach habayis mebachutz in Perek Gimel. Why didn't he wait to Perek Dalet where he writes all the other halachas? So to me it seems poshut. Al Pesach habayis is not only a halacha, a detail like all the others. That is ikar hatakona, just like be'erev. Tiknu chachomim shebiyoyse ador shiyu madlike neros al pischei be'erev al pischei betayim. And pischei betayim is like erev. And like it goes without saying that you light ner Chanukah in the morning, you're not makayim a mitzvah. Shrage betahara mayahane, nobody sees neros in daylight, goes the same pischei betayim. So this proves that according to the Rambam, Pischei B'Teyem is ma'akev b'di'eved, lo kedivrei harashbo, v'lo kedivrei haritvo. The Ritva writes, Ritva Chedoshes, not the old Ritvas, which are not from the Ritva. The Ritva writes, when the Gemara says, B'shas sakona manicha ol shelchonoi, it doesn't mean skonas nefoshes. It doesn't mean when our lives are in danger. Kol tsar, v'kol torach. Ulefichach Omar Moiri, and the Ritva quotes his great Rebbe the Ra'o, B'mukim shaharuach min hasheves, you could light inside. According to the Ritva, in America, in Europe, in Eretz Yisrael, you don't need to light outside. Ruach min hasheves. So the Ritva seems to be clear. B'shas zakona manich al shelchonoi is not a special takona b'shas sakona. We're not dealing when there are decrees and Jewish lives are in danger. Kol torach, kol sakona. So the Yocha Shulchan in Sif Chof Daled and Simen Tov Reish Ayin Beis writes that the minig to be madlik b'fnim is because you can't be madlik outside. It's windy. It's rainy. You could make a glass box like everybody does in Eretz Yisrael, but the Yocha Shulchan writes you're not mechuyev to do that. He doesn't quote the Ritva, but it's mafurish in the Ritva. She'ilas Yavitz, Rabbi Yankov Emden, Chelek Aleph Siman Kuf Mem Tes, he says, Korav ani loimar sheme'ikar adin, you need to have a glass box to be Makayim al Pesach Beisoy Mebachutz. And that is what most people in Eretz Yisrael do. So do I. My Chanukah that I light outside is in a glass box. So, Yocha Shulchan says, you're not mechuyev to go to that extreme. You're not mechuyev to spend money. So the Yocha Shulchan, he would be very gratified to see the Ritva, but they clearly feel a Pesach Beis Mebefnim is not a special takona. Even shelo b'shas takona yoytze b'fnim. And I think that is a machlokes Rashba and Rambam. The Rambam says Pischa B'Teim is just like Erev, and that is Ikar HaTakana. So Chassidim, according to the Rambam, are not yoytze, but the halacha is in accordance to the Rashba, to the Ritva, obviously. So what I mean to say up to this point in our Shiur is Mukam Adloka and Zman Adloka Ha Baha Talia. And the fundamental question is, how do we define mitzvah Adlokas Ner Chanukah? According to the Rambam, Laharois Ulegalois Haneis, that's Persum Enissa. And that is why, according to the Rambam, Kol Soregel Menashuk, you're out. It's a Brucha Levatola, there no longer is a mitzvah. And Rambam Lishitosoi, Bifnim, you're not Yoitza, only B'Shas Sakona. Because it's all about Persum Enissa. And therefore, it must be Al Pesach HaBayis Mebachutz, Lefnei Shekol Soregel Lemin Hashuk. Because the mitzvah is Persum Enissa, Dafka L'Reshus HaRabim. Tur Lishitosoi Lahazkir Hanes. It's about Yoido L'Shem Chazdoi, not only about Nifla'oisav Livnei Yodam. And therefore, according to the Tur, no one is out there, but you still have a mitzvah Ada Loisa Shachar. And the Rashba L'Shitosoi, we proved from the Rashba Yoytze B'fnim. Because the Rashba also says you could light Ada Loisa Shachar. Mukam Adloka Ne'adloka Ha Baha Talia. But the question will still be, but why lechatchila light b'fnim? Why would Chassidim light b'fnim if you have an option to do, light b'chutz and do persum v'nisel b'nei reshus harabim? Because all we proved from the Rashba and the Ritva is you're yoytze b'fnim. But why not be mekayim the mitzvah like tikkun chazal al pesach beisim v'b'chutz and to do persum v'nisel? So, Chassidim always adhere to mineg avoisei biyadei. And as I made clear in the beginning of the year, besides the Rambam and the Beis of almost all the other Rishonim, Gedol Sfarad and Gedol Ashkenaz, right? Our mineg is to be matlik b'filim. And we assume many times it wasn't mamish a sakana. But the Ritva says tsar, torach. I think most of the time in Golas, it was somewhat unpleasant or damaging to be madlik b'chutz. So I really think, bizman hazeh, why not be madlik b'chutz? I don't know, now with the rise of anti-Semitism and chutz la'aretz, maybe Yidden in many places in the world will feel uncomfortable, and maybe the Goyim will knock over the menorahs or steal the menorahs or throw them over. Well, however, in Eretz Yisrael, I think the minig, the beautiful minig, is to go back to Ikar Takonas Chazal and be Madlik Neres al Pesach HaBeisim HaBechutz, and that is why my personal minig is Befnim, Ke minig Avoisai, and Bechutz, Ke Ikar Dina du Shulchan Aruch, and that is what I do. I wrote in Minchas Osher, Chelik Beis, and I wrote a great deal about Hilchas Chanukah, and I made an argument that in big apartment houses in America and in Eretz Yisrael, when there is no connection between one's personal home and his ner, if you light by the Knesset of the house and there are 20 menorahs there, then there is no indication that this is my ner. And I argued that Tefach HaSomuch LePesach shows that it's not enough to make Pesum Enissa Lebnei Reshus HaRabim. It needs to be obvious that this is your ner and your Pesum Enissa, and that is why it needs to be Tefach HaSomach LePesach. Tefach HaSomach LePesach is not about Chashda. Shnei Psochim is about Chashda. Tefach HaSomach LePesach proves that Chazal said, Pesach Beisoi Mebechutz. It needs to be obvious, this is my ner and this is my Pesum Enissa. And that is why, if you have 20 Chanukahs in the entrance to the home, maybe that is not a lechatchila. And in that case, it would be preferable chaloin asomach reshus harabim. But if you're higher than Esrem Amis, then that is not Persum Enissa. And this is another dilemma in which I have an interesting opinion, but I do think it's Toras Emes. And many times I'm asked, what is preferable? Pesach Habayis together with 20 other neighbors, or Chaloina Somach Rishus Harab? But the Chaloina Somach Harab is higher than Esrem Amis. Esrem Amis, every house, the third floor is higher than Esrem Amis. And Amma is 60 centimeters. Esrem Amis would be 12 meters. That's not very high. Most houses, third floor, fourth floor, Esrem. But do you see? Of course you see. Go out on the street. And do you see the fourth floor of houses? Of course you do. So why did Chazal say, L'mala mi'esamam lo yishalta b'yainei? Go to the old city in Yerushalayim and try to look up to the third floor. There are no third floors, but try. Or the old city in Tzvas. When you have these narrow cobblestone streets, to look up, Esramamis, you need to stretch your neck and hold on to your kapel. It shouldn't fall off. When you have Sdei Re'iyah Rachav, like in modern cities, of course you see L'mala mi'esramamo. So push it. But when you have these narrow streets, and in the Jewish ghetto, going back hundreds of years, people did not see L'mala mi'esramamo because you were blocked from all sides. But when you have a broad range of vision, Sdei Re'iyah, you see L'mala mi'esramamo. And therefore, I paskin, better Chaloina Somach Rishus Harabim, even if it's L'mala mi'esramamo. Because first of all, you're Yoitza al Shulchanai. You're Yoitza. You're Yoitza because your family sees. So what I say, the din of L'mala mi'esramamo doesn't change. Dinim of Chazal don't change. And the fact that our streets are broad would not change the halacha. L'mala mi'esramamo lo yotze dechavosai. But you're Yoitze dechoiva al Shulchanai, in my opinion. So the question would be, where do I do more pesum enisa? Chaloina somach rishus harabim, you have more pesum enisa. Especially in many homes, because the way we build homes and the way we live changes. And in many homes, the entrance to the home is not visible from rishus harabim at all. So many homes have a front yard with a gate because people don't want you looking into their homes. So Pesach HaSomach Rishus Harabim, there's a machlokes rishonim, is it Pesach HaChotzer or Pesach HaBayis? Pesach HaChotzer, there are 100 apartments that come in from this Chotzer, and there's no heker. Who is this ner? And therefore, in my opinion, if there is no heker Knisa LaBayis, and sometimes the entrance to your home is not visible at all from Rishus Harabim, better L'mala mi'esramamo Chaloina Somach Rishus Harabim, because first of all you're Yoitza al Shulchanai, and if you're Yoitza al Shulchanai, the more important aspect is Persumei Nisa. So we explained the machlokes Rambam and Tur, and my feeling is Mokom Adloka and Zman Adloka Haba Hatalya, and the fundamental question is Zeichel Nesa or Persumei Nisa. Yoido L'Shem Chazdai or Nifla Oisav Livnei Yodam. Oid Hashem Od Befi or B'Soich Rabim Ahaleleno, because Zeichel Nesa and Persumei Nisa are two different concepts and they are not the same. So this is a very interesting sugya and a very interesting analysis of mitzvahs Ner Chanukah and the implications it has in the two most common areas of discussion, where to light and when to light. Tichle Regel Menashuk has always also dramatically changed. So Tichle Regel Menashuk, the Rif, the Rambam, and the Shulchan Aruch, spanning a period of 500 years, they all write about a half hour. That is no longer relevant. In Haredi towns and communities, 11:30, 12:30. You know, especially if you have a simcha hall in your street, And every night you're going to have Mesibis and Sheva Bruchas and Bar Mitzvahs and Tanoims, and people will be out there in the street till 12 o'clock by night. How do we define Tichle Regel Menashuk? And many times I say, if we adhere to the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch says, after half hour, you could put out the candles. You no longer have a mitzvah. If you light with the shkia, the first half hour, you have 0 persum menisa. 0. Because nobody is out on the street. Everybody is busy with his own Ner Chanukah. So if you light with the shkia, and after a half hour, you're going to put out the neiros, besides yourself and your kids, you have 0 persum menisa, and no one is going to be out there on the street. In days of yore, people were afraid to leave their homes by night. There was no lighting. And we see that in many halachas. Birchas me'en sheva that we say b'leil Shabbos. What is Birchas me'en sheva about? If a person davens a long Shabbat or he came late, we don't want him to go alone, because going alone by night was dangerous. The wolves and the bears came out of the forest and they roamed the streets. And the ganovim and the burglars were out there, so people rushed home. Nobody left his home. So after a half hour, it's called Saregel Menashuk. Talmidoi, the Rishonim writes, Moichlei Shemen. So the merchants that sent Shemen, they were out there because some people would just forgot to buy Shemen. And it's Chanukah by night, so they're going to rush out. Is anybody out there selling Shemen? So from the days of the Rif till the days of the Bis Yosef, hundreds of years, it was a half hour. Electricity changed everything. And electricity caused people to be up very late at night. And our streets are lighted, so no longer a danger to go out by night. And there's so much activity going on. Is there a chiyuv me'ikar adin to have an Ner Chanukah light till 12:30 by night? Because that is the nutach l'regel min hashuk. I definitely think it's a mitzvah min hamufchar, a hidden mitzvah, to have it as long as possible. So I am an einikal of Reb David Deitch. Reb David Deitch was a Talmud of the Noida B'Yehuda, and there are more tshuvas in the Noida B'Yehuda written to Reb David Deitch than to any other personality. And he corresponds with the Chassam Sofer, and in his Sefer he writes, Bizman hazeh, you can't put out your Ner Chanukah after a half hour. He falls short of saying you're mechuyev to have it till late by night. No, we're not choylek on the Shulchan Aruch, but it definitely is a hiddur mitzvah, and therefore you shouldn't extinguish your neiros like the Shulchan Aruch says after a half hour. And the Shulchan Aruch says after a half hour, mutar l'shtamish lo'iroi, because it's no longer a mitzvah. That definitely doesn't apply bisman hazeh. And therefore, it would be hiddur mitzvah to put in more shemen and have the neiros light more time. But I won't say it's a chiyuv to have them till 12 o'clock by night. And it really depends where you live. It depends how busy your street is. So if you live in a more affluent neighborhood and the streets are quiet, then Kol Tzedek HaMashik is relatively early. If you live in a more busy neighborhood, as I said, where there are shopping centers and simcha halls, then Tichle Regel Menashuk would be very late. Im keinu tatlud v'orecha l'shiurim, and therefore, anybody that adheres to the Shulchan Aruch is safe. But it definitely is a hiddur mitzvah to have more persumei nisa. And that is also my minig. You know, I put oil today. We are an age of plenty, and most of us could afford a little more shemen to put into the ner. We're not going to go broke by having our neiros Chanukah light for another hour or two, and I do think it would be defined as a hiddur mitzvah, because Kol Tzedek Menashuk is different today than it was in the past, as we all understand. So, what is Chanukah all about? The Levush explains, Purim and Chanukah have a lot in common. Both were Nisim, Bizman Bayis Sheni, and both were miracles, and the only two Yomim Tovim D'Rabbanan that we keep ad le'etzem Yom Hazeh, but they're very different in nature. Purim chayvenish livisume. You need to eat meat and drink wine, and a lot of wine. Chanukah, there is no achile, no shtia, only adlokas haner. And the Levush explains, and it's so misyashev al alev, the way we hold the Yom Tov has to do with what is the Yom Tov all about. So Purim, lahashmed, lahareg, or la'abed eskole Yehudim. We were in danger of destruction and annihilation. The skona was a skona to life, and therefore we rejoice life. And that is ba'achila v'shtia. The danger in Chanukah was not annihilation. It was a sakana of ruchnius, of spirituality, of Torah v'mitzvahs. Lashkichem torasecha lavira mechuka retzanecho. And that is why the way we are to remember is with adlokas haner, kiner, mitzvah, v'Torah or, and shemen, which is the nes pecha shemen, and has nothing to do with achila v'shtia. So what was Gzeres HaYavonim all about? Timu kol hashmanim. If they didn't want Bnei Yisrael to light the menorah, why didn't they burn the oil? Why didn't they just spill it out? Which they didn't. Timu kol hashmanim. Why? Yud Gimel Pertzis Porzu HaYavonim. And that is a Mishnah. Why didn't they destroy the Beis HaMikdash? They had the power to do so. But they didn't. Yud Gimel Pertzis. And where? B'chayil. What is the chayil? Chuvas Ramami Pano explains. The chayil was a low fence. Wasn't really a moat or a wall like the choimes of the Harabayas. The chayil was the siman. Up to this fence, goyim could come into Harabayas. From this marker inward, only Jews. That is where the Yavonim Porzu Yud Gimel Pertzis. Kizvu lechem al keren hashor she'ein lechem chelik be'elokei Yisrael. Keren hashor behei hayidi'ah. I contemplated for a long time, what is the significance of Kizvu lechem al keren hashor? Which shor are we dealing with? Keren hashor seems to be a shor with a hey hayidi'ah. Libi Yoimali. Gzeres HaYavonim was all about the fact that we believe we are the chosen people and we are Am Hashem. Chelkoi v'nachlosoi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Greeks were an enlightened people. And they said, why do you think you stand apart? You're just like all the others. Yerchu ish b'shem Elohav. You believe in yours, and we believe in our gods, and we're all fundamentally the same. The Medrash says, Medrash Rabbah v'yikra chov zayin, shor roish lekol hakorbonos. The Yavonim didn't destroy the Beis HaMikdash. They said, you want to bring your korbonos, go ahead, on the condition al keren hashor, it needs to be written, Ein lanu chelek be'elokei Yisrael. We are not chelkoi v'nachlosoi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We worship like all the others do. You're no different than we are. And that was the condition of the Yavonim. You want to be Makav Karbonas? We will let you. On the condition, Al Keren Ashor Shu Rosh L'Kol HaKarbonos. You should write, Ein lanu chelek be'elokei Yisrael. You could believe in Hashem, but you are not chelkoi v'nachlosoi, and there's nothing unique about you. And that is why there were Goiza and Chodesh Shabbos Mila. Chodesh Shabbos Mila, Shabbos Yom Tov Mila are ois beini uveinechem. This sets us apart. Ois bris Chodesh al Avraham Avinu, Nochri sheshovas chayev misa. Chodesh is Yomim Tovim. Yomim Tovim and Mila are the mitzvahs which set us apart. Yes, They are Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. And by Yetzias Mitzrayim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu came, Lakach es goy mikerev goy. That's as when we were chosen. And that was Gezeres HaYavonim. Why Yud Gimel Pertzes? I said this many times. 13 is our magic number. Everything precious to a Yid is 13. And when I ask people, what do you remember? What is unique about 13? The first thing that comes to mind is Bar Mitzvah. Every Yodam Yisrael, every child becomes a Bar Chivya, becomes an Eved Hashem when he's 13 years old. But there is so much more about 13. Yud Gimel Ikrei Emunah. The 13 fundamentals of our Emunah that the Rambam defines. Yud Gimel Ikrei Emunah. Others learn the Bible as well. But the Gemara says in Gittin Daf Samach, Lo yikoras HaKadosh Baruch Hu brisim Yisrael elo al Torah shebal peh. Torah shebal peh is unique. No one learns Torah shebal peh besides us. And the Yud Gimel Midos Shat Torah Nidreshes Behem. Those are the fundamentals of Torah shebal peh. Yud Gimel Midos Shat Torah Nidreshes Behem. What else is Yud Gimel? Yud Gimel Midos Shel Rachamim, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed to Moshe Rabbeinu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised, whenever your children will say Yud Gimel Midos Shel Rachamim, I will be there for them, and they will be Zochel Rachamei Shamayim. So Yud Gimel Ekemunah, Yud Gimel Midos Shat Torah Nidreshes, Yud Gimel Midos Shel Rachamim. That's what sets us apart, and that is why they were poets. Yud Gimel Pertzes, not 12 and not 14, not 10 and not 15, but Yud Gimel. Did they have that in mind? How would we know? But it is clear to me that number is significant. And that is why the Pertzes were in the Chayil, not in the Choymes HaZorah, and not in Kodesh HaKodeshim, but in that marker that is Ad Kan Goyim could come, but not more than here. And that was Gezeres HaYavonim. And therefore, Nes Chanukah was the Hatzolah of Yiddishkeit. It was once again saying, yes, we are the chosen people. Chosen not only for benefits and privileges, but chosen for achrayis. All the others get away with Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. They have an easy life. Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach was essentially boiled down, be a mensch. Be a mensch, be a decent human being, nothing beyond that. We were chosen, but we carry a heavy burden as a chosen people. 7 was transformed into Taryag, 613. It's quite a leap, quite a change. Yes, but we are happy to be the chosen people. We are happy to serve, and that is what Chanukah was all about. And that was the Yud Gimel Pertzes. V'kishagavu achashmenoim, they were metaken Yud Gimel Ishtachavoyes and Beis Hamikdash. Yud Gimel Ishtachavoyes, and Ishtachavoyes is the height of Avodas Hashem, of Hachnoah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is Ishtachavoyes. So that is what Chanukah is about, and that is why Chanukah, no bosa, no yayin, hadlukas haner, ki ner mitzvah v'torah or. 2 things nimshelu l'ner. Nishmas ha'odam nimshelu l'ner, and Torah nimshelu l'ner. Ner Hashem nishmas ha'odam, ki ner mitzvah v'torah or. And when a Yiddish neshama comes together with Torah, that is the Ner. And those are Neros Chanukah. And the Sefer HaRokech says, Lamed Vov Neros Chanukah, Mahadram and Amadan coincide with Lamed Vov hours that the Or HaGonas He'ir Ba'olam. And a Chanukah we could be Zoiche to the Or HaGonas. So, Chanukah is a very special Yom Tov, and more than any other Yom Tov, it is all about our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is all about Ruchnius. It is all about the love of Torah and the Mesiras Nefesh of Torah. And the Melchemes HaChashmenoam, which was a war that B'derech HaTeva they had no chance of winning. But Matisior b'Mesiras Nefesh said, there is no other way. This is about who we are. This is an existential threat, no less than the threat of Haman and Achashverosh, lahashmed, lahalig, uliyabed. And this is what Chanukah is all about. Yet also we should be zoicha to see the Oragonos shenignas b'Torah, and it shines b'neirus Chanukah. And when we remember the neirus of Menorah Amor, shiyaru l'rachamim v'rarotzoin, ad shiyaru rotzen lefnon of Yisborach Shemoy, and we should see b'kol b'yameinu the Kohen Gadol, meitev umadlik es haneiros b'Menorah Amor shebebeis hamikdash, sheyabona b'mahero v'yomeinu omein.